Hi, I'm Liam Dann, New Zealand Herald Business Editor at Large, and welcome to this episode of Money Talks. This is a podcast about money, but we're not going to tell you how to get rich, and we're not going to try and pick the next interest rate move. In this series, I'll be talking to interesting New Zealanders about how money has shaped their lives and what they've learned over the years. For today's podcast, I'm joined by publisher, entrepreneur and business leader and founder of Sunshine Books, Dame Wendy Pye. Kia ora, Wendy. Welcome to Money Talks.
Thank you very much.
I want to dive into the backstory of how you got to where you are now, but just to bring us up to speed, what's the focus of the business right now? New markets. I heard that you were moving into China, and I'm sure publishing generally, you're having to transform digitally.
Yes, well, we started the digital transformation about 25 years ago.
Right, yeah.
When people it was still dial-up, of course. It was still a scratchy dial-up.
Yeah.
And wasn't even really, but I'd done well in America. I made a lot of money in America. I built a $100 million company in America with a guy and I from one room, and we're very successful. And I sold out just those particular rights for the American-Canadian rights, and because education is a very good business in America.
Yeah.
And I came home and thought, well, what do I do? I was too young to probably hang up the shingle, and I taught a lot of kids to read. So I thought, well, digital is the way to go. I saw kids playing on the PlayStation, the first PlayStations that were out, the first gaming, which is pretty amateur when you look at it now, when you think of it as a primitive way. So I built a building in Mount Wellington. Basically, we brought a team together from around the world. So I thought, imagine if we could help kids learn to read on a digital device. And so this was really a journey we began on the digital.
Yeah, so you've sort of been ahead of that curve.
I was well ahead. Because I sort of thought, it wouldn't it be fabulous if you had a reading program. We put a piece of white paper on the wall, we put a team together, and we said, let's make it happen, And I was amazed at what 5-year-olds could do. We tested a lot of kids looking at what they could do. And again, it was pretty primitive because in the sense that we were using Flash, of course, which was a wonderful device that Apple had developed.
Yeah, yep.
And later on, of course, they changed to HTML5 and got rid of all the Flash. But and then I went out to the world to sell it, a dream to the world, to teach the world to read for $50. That's really what my dream was.
Yeah.
But of course, people laughed at me. People said that can't be done. British Telecom said you'll never ever play, a video on. I wish I'd had their business cards because I could actually go and haunt them now.
To them now.
Is that what I mean?
Well, I'll come back to a bit more of that, but I'd like to jump right back, as we do in Money Talks, just to ask you maybe your first memories of having money. And do you remember, when you might have first held it in your hand?
Oh, yes, I think that, cash is always king, isn't it, really? Well, it was to a stage until my last trip to China. I realised there's no cash anymore, at all in China anymore now. You have to have the WeChat. I think that it's sort of ownership is really a helpful thing for you to own your own house and to own things really. And not from a paranoia of owning things, but I think from a business perspective, I think you have to live within your means and you have to develop your strategies with money. And money is a valuable asset, but of course it only as good as it works for you. Well, money sits under a mattress. It's no good for you.
Looking back at through the book, really, at your early childhood, it sounds like it was a fairly tough life on the farm in Western Australia. That there wouldn't have been a lot of pocket money and
things. Sure, there wasn't a lot of pocket money, but really it was tough. But it taught you resilience, and then from later on, it's really helped me because it has been tough building a business internationally, building a business, for example, in Africa and places where you go into the outback. To the real outback, into townships and working with Mandela and people that we worked with in South Africa when he came to power. But, I think the thing is that it taught me resilience and it taught me to survive, really. You have to be a survivor. I think all exporters and all pioneering exporters know about that as well.
Yeah. I mean, one of the stories that struck me was that, because we often ask about pocket money and the first things you saved for, but it didn't sound like there was any money involved, but you're getting your first bike was a really big deal in your childhood. And
yes, it was really big. We used to then paint it with enamel and make sure it would look like brand new, that sort of thing. But then I think at that time, it was really an interesting time in history. When you're talking about the late 50s and you're talking about late 50s it was.
Yep.
You're talking about really a time, I was born in 43, of course, before the war ended. But you're talking about a time that really a lot of people didn't have much money. And it really, but it wasn't the reason I've written the book too is because I really get rather tired of people telling me, I can't make it because I was impoverished or whatever I was. It's like, what a load of rubbish. Just get out there and make it happen. And I think that what I've proved is you can.
Yeah, and you did get out there. I mean, you left home, you headed for Sydney, I guess, and did you feel like you had a strong base in your school and academic learning? Did you go out with a vision for what you wanted to do?
I had a bit of a vision that I could work hard and control the world, but that's okay,
Yeah.
When it's in an operative term of controlling the world. But I feel that, hard work is never, and really nobody owes you a living. That's what we were brought up on. We were brought up on the principle. There was no such a thing as a welfare system owes you a living, and that really played into, during the COVID years, for example, I didn't apply for a grant from the government coffers. I mean, we didn't need it. We could survive. Yeah. I was surprised at how many business people, of leading business people in this country, who actually supplied. They couldn't get their application in quick enough for the government trough. I think that what you have to do is you have to learn to survive within your own means of what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I read that you had some interest in maybe being a journalist, and you tried to go for that to start with. Wasn't to be, but then you kind of ended up back in that world.
That's right. I just ended up, first of all, as basically, writing copy and being creative and thinking up creative ideas, because I'm a bit of a dreamer, really, from the best of times. I dream about a business opportunity, and I often think about, and when I approach any business opportunity, it's I always call it's either a war or climbing a mountain. Often you're on. So somebody says, "Where are you at that stage?" I say, "I'm still on the landing craft. Haven't even reached the beach yet. Got to climb up the hill first." And then people are shooting at you, other opposition companies, which is quite a good strategy to a degree.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, the first part of your career sounds, and I'm probably jumping here, I should really ask you what it was that brought you to New Zealand and how you ended up here, I suppose. Having grown up in Western Australia, started a career in Sydney, was a sort of a part of the plan to leave Australia?
No, it really wasn't part of the plan. It was just that I flattered with a couple of girls, and, like you normally flatter, and we flattered on the North Shore of Sydney. And one of them came from New Zealand, and I thought, I might as well go and explore New Zealand. I really wanted to travel wider afield. But I met my husband, and that was the problem. You see, you just get married.
So you basically settled down.
That's what happened.
Yeah. But you continued the career, and, through those years, to the point where you got to running the publishing side of things for, I think it was New Zealand News Group, right? So it was quite a successful career in its own right to that point, at a time when you probably had to work pretty hard as a woman to bash through some
It was successful
doors.
In the corporate world. Yes, it was very successful. And really, in the book, of course, I feature, actually it was the New Zealand Herald and published a couple of articles and said, what has she done? She must have done something, right? And so it was an interesting time. Remember, it was a few years before the stock market crash of all times. I mean, everyone talks about the 2008 stock market crash recently, but really that was a brutal crash. That came as a crash of all times, really, when you look at it in a retrospect in history of New Zealand and the companies that lost their business and everything. And so it was a tough, it was a time when everyone was high-flying. You'd make $1 million in 10 minutes and another $1 million in another 10 minutes. You know what I mean? It was a sort of one of those incredible times.
Well, it's interesting to me looking at how a newspaper group was, I guess they had the printing presses, but they had such a large publishing division that they were doing children's books as a newspaper publisher.
Yes, well, I first started to get into publishing, book side, was that, I don't know whether remember Neville Webber. Neville Webber used to be a great smoker. He used to smoke about 35 cigarettes a day or something, but he was the typical type of head of a newspaper group that you have, like a sort of like a sit there and, the editors would say what we're going to do and, that sort of thing. And,
very old school.
Neville called me in and said, we've got to start a book company. We've got to start a book company because, and you're the one to do it, etc., etc. So that's how I first got into publishing books. And it was mainly things like columns that we would do, cooking columns and other things we would do. And mainly our feature writers, particularly also from the Christchurch Star, because we owned the Christchurch Star as well at the time. And so basically we would put those together in a book form and sell them. And sell them through the newspaper.
So the popular columnists would have a book of their columns.
And they have a book out and then later on I published, of course I worked, with Pat Booth and people like that publishing the Mr. Asia files,
Right,
Penguin published them, but we put them together. So
yeah, sure. Were children's books in the mix at that point? Were you interested in the educational side?
No, not really. I started looking at children's books in the sense of looking at alternative things, because it wasn't terribly lucrative, the division that I ran. And I always hate, on that corporate, when they do those corporate family trees.
Oh, yeah.
You find a sort of a shaky line in a business, and it's a sort of like a cross line that looks like it's going to fall off any moment. So, I wasn't going to allow the directors to come and say, we'll get rid of that division. That's what they tend to do. We're restructuring today. Well, nothing changes. We're restructuring, right? And as you all know, that it's a massive thing, just like the media industry now.
Yeah, well,
it's been a massive restructuring.
Constant change and turmoil. I mean, you probably had one of the biggest shocks, though, of all, Briley Group, corporate takeover merchants. They came in and just took the whole thing over and restructured it overnight, right?
But in fairness to the Briley Group, I was one of the chosen people who they really trained, and it really helped me. I mean, Bruce Hancock's was an interesting guy. He used to go in and say, it's very easy to take over companies today. You just go in and all the directors are asleep in the corner, and just take them over. You know what I mean? And it was sort of, and I spent many times having a chat to him on the private Briley plane at the airport, which was quite a big thing, because when you're a sort of a minion in the corporate world, to be invited on the thing, and really. They were taking over companies, looking at mergers and taking over at that time. And if you looked at history, it was an incredible amount of mergers and things they took over.
Yeah.
And so when they really looked at, it was a difficult job when I was given the job of the Weekly, because basically the Weekly had been the cash cow for the Auckland Star. The evening newspapers were dying around the world as well. They weren't just dying in New Zealand. And it had been a long time. And the Weekly was really the cash cow that they used to drag the money from, because that was an advertising cow. But then, of course, suddenly everything changed. There was, Warwick Roger brought out the Metro. There was a whole lot of magazines coming out. There was glossy paper. We were on newsprint. Can you believe? Half the advertisements looked three-dimensional almost. They were badly printed. Yeah. And so I was given that job to restructure it, which is quite difficult.
So you're right in the thick of it, but then at some point, and this might be the best thing that ever happened in your career, you get made redundant out of the blue.
Well, I think the man who fired me have often said that. He said, I saw the vision.
Oh, right. He says that now.
Which is a load of rubbish.
You probably didn't feel like that at the time.
I was listening now. A load of rubbish. Yeah, it was a good thing. It's sometimes in life, we have periods of our life where we go through in business, looking at business deals and reflecting on business deals you've done and what you should have done and what you shouldn't have done and things like that. And it's really interesting. I think that in the time it just probably gave me a cold shower, as I call it. It was a long cold shower, but it wasn't easy.
Yeah. It's a big choice you have to make, though, at that stage of life to get made redundant. You could go and see the recruitment people and find another corporate job, but you decided to back yourself and start your own business. Can you tell me a little bit about the thinking behind that and what sort of gave you the confidence to have a go?
Well, I thought of, it really comes back to this IP and owning everything I own now. And what you have is that I just decided that no bastard would ever walk me off the place again. No bastard would ever, excuse me swearing, but would never take me off the place. Because, I'd spent 21 years building up companies. I'd opened the American market. I'd pioneered the development of education into the American market. There was a huge opportunity, huge things that I did. And I thought, they don't appreciate. And really, a lot of job offers came in for a marketing manager or, I could do that, a production manager, marketing manager, et cetera, and, and to pay the wages, the first wages, I worked for Uncle Rupert, Uncle Rupert's always available, probably. Yeah, well, probably not now. Yeah. He's 93 or something. But what I'm saying is that I worked for Rupert Murdoch, the Murdoch Group, developing a strategy as well, just for a while, because that paid the wages. You've got to have cash to pay wages for the couple of staff that I brought with me.
But you could see potential for this line of educational publishing, I guess. Even though, in New Zealand you got the school journals and it's a bit more locked up here, but you could see that there was a role for the private sector in that.
Well, all the contacts I'd made before came to me. The world came to me, literally. Yep. I mean, literally the world just phoned me and said, and it was only phone, of course. We were just the internet was just hadn't even been developed totally. But of course, the fax machines were in operation. That was all. And they phoned and said, "What are you going to do?"
Yeah, and you must have already had good contacts with the children's writers and people who could.
I had those contacts, and all the writers and all the people came to me. But the company then tried to destroy me on New Year's Eve. On Christmas Eve, they delivered a thing that you can't publish. I didn't have a clause in any contract or anything. In those days, you didn't have contracts that said, you can't do this or you can't do that, that sort of thing. And they came at me and said that, you can't publish books. Well, I thought that was ridiculous. So I set up what we call a subterfuge of a two-mirror way, which I think is good for business, really. You have a suburban lawyer.
Yeah,
and then you have the top guy in town reporting, and they don't know because they think it's a suburban lawyer writing
the letters.
And when you're fighting and it was pretty scary. I mean, at that time they were about an $80 million organisation. Totally, I'm talking about with everything. You're fighting them, from the beaches.
But they hadn't put it under contract. That you couldn't.
They had they never had any contract. They never had leg to stand on. But we actually proved a case that. It was an American case, interesting enough, that was proved that refrigerator was a refrigerator.
Yeah.
It looks the shape of a refrigerator.
Yeah.
But you can, a book is a book, and no one can copyright the actual shape. They can copyright an unusual shape, but the normal rectangular shape or the thing was a book. I had actually developed that anyway with children.
Well, that's right. You'd brought that style
what
yourself.
What a load of rubbish, right? So anyway, but never mind. And they also contacted all the people I had dealt with and told them, they wouldn't deal with them if they probably. And all the people wrote back to me and said, "What a load of rubbish! We're telling them to get lost."
Yeah,
so that was good.
Look, coming through the publishing side, I know you've got good writers and everything involved. But is there a sense that you have a sort of the idea that you've got a feel for what kids would like and that sort of stuff?
Feeling.
Yeah, where do you think that comes from? From being a kid yourself,
right. That's right, and it's sort of it's a gut feeling of what works. And now, of course, after 40 years of working the markets, I have a gut feeling. I know what actually works in different markets and what actually can develop in a market, working very closely with distributors on the ground. In our case, I have a company, my own company in Australia, but distributors on the ground and people who are developing content and developing curriculum. I only wish that New Zealand wouldn't get too really nervous about me. I think, the Ministry of Education is always nervous about me because they always think I'm taking over or something, which is a load of rubbish.
Yeah. Well, there is a lot of, the way the system's run here is quite different compared to America, for example.
Compared with Australia, compared with everywhere in the world except Russia and Cuba, I think. It's the same. But it's quite sad, really, because, we're a very small country and all I dream of is that we all should work together to achieve particularly the output for Mara and Pacific Island children. We can't actually allow all of these children not to learn to read.
Yeah,
and we need help from everybody, and we need to sit down. And it doesn't, just because I'm a commercial organisation, I don't see, I give a lot of voluntary time and I give a lot of things away as well. But, what's the hang-up? What's the hang-up? Yeah. But there seems to still be a hang-up.
Yeah, that's tough. I guess, because it's understanding, like really to get kids to read, they have to something has to appeal with the content in the book and or whatever they've got on screen, right? It's got to be something. Right.
And you've got to move with the times too. You've got to modernise. You've got to learn. The new generation of kids coming through are different kids. We learn a lot, and that's the project I'm working on at the moment. It's a really interesting project.
Can you talk about it? Or?
Yeah, sure. I'm really, really interested in the power of the gaming industry. I think gaming is a really interesting thing. It seems to be occupying a lot of children, and a lot of effort. So what my dream is to have basically really good educational games, not just educational games that will deliver, not just something about a giraffe running around with the letter G on the screen or something, not like that, not like a Sesame Street. Sesame Street is fine, but it's a fun thing, with children running around. And even ABC Mouse, with Apple is the same sort of thing. What I'm doing is I want to create something that will be deliverable. In other words, that every child, particularly children who have difficulty, particularly children who are dyslexic, imagine if we can use the gaming for the gaming's magic, and we can marry that with solid education. And that's what I'm working on at the moment with TAL Education. They're about a 4.4 billion. I love to say those numbers because it's like Fonterra, isn't it? But, they're a partner with me and we're working, and they see the dream too. And they're a top gaming company in the world, actually. And so I'm working with them on, that's what I was doing in China a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know whether I'll pull it off, but who knows?
Oh, it's worth a go. I mean, it's obviously, like, if you can get kids, it's that thing of passing the next level. If you can get them hooked onto passing
in the back of a car, the kids say, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" They can be using their mobile phone and learning to read at the same time. How's that? Looking out the window. You know what kids are like. Are we there yet?
Yeah. I want to come back to some bigger thoughts about fixing some aspects of New Zealand and things, but just we have a few quick fire questions that we like to run through, and one of them is what the poorest you ever have been is, do you think, at any stage in your life? What stage in your life would you have been
I think when you first marry, you're always like that. You're paying your house off, you're getting the bulk meat or something, and trying to fit it in your second-hand fridge that goes blank.
Were you
and your washing machine breaks down. I think that, we just live within our means, but, and so it's a sort of a tough time. It's always a tough time in the sense that you see other people, doing things and painting houses. I was good at painting houses because I'm left-handed. I was born left-handed. I was basically left-handed. But I had to eat my right because in school
you're from
they
that
wouldn't allow
generation
you
where
to
they forced you
use
to
your left hand. So I'm ambidextrous. So it's very handy, and I've got 6 foot reach with my arms. It's very handy when you're painting the outside of a house because you can just switch your brush over and just keep on painting. I painted a lot of houses as well.
Yeah. Were you a good budgeter and all that sort of stuff, or were you a spender?
When you have to live within your means, I always believe that you have to live within your means. I think that people can compromise, so you don't necessarily have to. Have to live extravagantly or anything. I think that, I'm a good cook as well, so probably helps.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the other question we have is along those lines of what would be the most indulgent purchase you've ever made, or what are the things that you like to splash out on?
I think the first was a sports car because I wanted a fast. So I like fast cars, really. Yep. But the trouble is, a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. The problem is they're too low to the ground now. I can't climb into those, so I need something a bit higher. But I quite like Saab. Actually, Saab's gone off the market now, but they were quite fun. They were sports cars, and it was a sports car that I bought. And other things, emeralds, beautiful pearls, emeralds that took 6 months to find in South America. There's a few indulgent things that I have done.
Yeah, well, a
few naughty things, in other words.
There are points
and racehorses. That's one of my failures.
I was talking to Rod Duke as well, and he couldn't think of anything, and then he said, and the racehorses, because obviously they cost a bit of money.
I have a lot of racehorses,
and it's anyone who's got them always says it is a bit of a money trap. While we're on the money topic, I asked the author Emily Perkins about this. Do you have a favourite book or any favourite sort of writers or advice and things on money, that you would look to, or that influenced you?
Not necessarily on money. My favourite books are autobiographies and biographies. I'm always fascinated how somebody has become what they've done,
so those life
what
stories,
they do in life, and how they achieve things and everything else. On money, I'm always interested in, new developments, particularly my husband and I have a large portfolio. We invest in things like mainly in the medical field, in the new development of cancer drugs and other things, particularly the American market. I'm very fond of the American market, investing in that because it does give you a good return.
Yeah.
And also, we look at, I'm really interested obviously in AI now and what's happening with AI and the development of AI as well. But in the medical field, there's a lot of new advances which are fantastic because we are on the verge of discovery of many things.
Yeah.
And they are fantastic. You can buy, and also minerals as well. I love minerals, actually. I love minerals. I love old Shane digging up the ground with his minerals or whatever he's going to do.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure there's $2 billion worth of gold in the South Island. But anyway, that's what Shane's talking about. $2 billion
fairly good shake in the 19th century, didn't they? But yeah, so I guess you're investing in areas where you actually find some interest. There's something interesting to you.
Well, it's sort of interesting because, you can buy shares at a few cents and they can become, but, I'm one of the original investors in Apple, for example, and when we bought the first Apple for $5, the share broker, who remained nameless in Auckland, said, "What are you buying those for? You're not going to do anything with Apple, right?" well, famous last words, isn't it? We're a large shareholder in Apple. But, and of course they never paid a dividend for a long time. It's not the dividend we're looking at, it's mainly the growth of the share portfolio, in the sense when you're looking at an investment portfolio, you've really got to look at, unless you're trading. If you're trading shares, it's different.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at the longer term. So medical shares, mineral shares, and also technology shares.
Yeah. One of the things I like to ask, and because obviously you've done well, and the money, you keep earning money and investing in things. But is it, what drives you? Is it the money so much, or is that a byproduct of sort of success and other goals?
It's a challenge of the hunt, really.
Yeah,
it's a challenge of the hunt. I think that I like to think I'm developing a new product that will benefit a lot of people. One of my product is very ethical, and I feel it's ethical as well. And I also help a lot of people as well. But I think that, there's nothing wrong with making money out of helping people. People have this thing about, what's wrong with, you've got to help. You've got to put something back into the community as well, and I do that through my association and my things that I'm associated with in my charities and things. But I think also it's the challenge of the hunt, really. It's the fun where you pitch yourself against the giants. And if you think about the major publishing houses of the world have all now been purchased by equity people.
Right.
The equity people are really interested in education. They love education. The reason they love it is because if we tomorrow morning had a recession, the two things that the government never cuts out, well, apart from crime and punishment or something, they cut out the health and education.
Yeah.
They're the two things that they fund. They might miss, you might have to go put up with old potholes for about another 2 months or something. Do you know what I mean? But health and education, and even looking at the budget this year, if you looked at the budget and you looked at the budget in Australia, you looked at the budget, even if we'll have a new president, I don't know whether we will have old president in America.
One of them will be old.
The budgets, even though the Americans say something different this morning, the budgets will still stay fairly static in education. And education is a key factor that most countries invest in quite heavily, governments. So, and they also pay their bills, which is quite a big thing too.
Yeah.
Like if you looked at some of the corporates who have in New Zealand, particularly at the moment, or any corporates who have suffered some equity problems, you look at their ratio of how many days they're waiting for payments, you understand?
Yeah.
Well, you don't have that in education because governments pay bills.
Yeah, sure.
And so, unless the government goes, maybe France will go to the wall. But what I'm saying is that, currently that's why the equity guys, it's a good return.
Yeah.
And in some ways it's a safe thing, like it's in some ways, if you looked at a portfolio, I often think of a board of directors looking at a portfolio and thinking, what are we going to invest in next? And, when people say it's education, oh, my grandchildren, oh, very good. People feel good about education where they don't feel good about probably products that may be some new thing that someone's developing. So I think it's a safe bet.
Yeah. It must have made, you sold the US business years ago.
Only the rights to those books.
Right, the rights. But you must have it must be attractive to other equity groups. Do you have to sort of fend off a few offers?
It sort of is. I don't really fend people off because most people don't know what I do. I don't think. I think they think it's a crazy lady who should be in a retirement village or something. Probably they don't know what I do. But it's just the huge amount of assets we have. The property in publishing houses. It's not really. It's not really the revenue that you're earning today. It's really the backlist. And what you own is really the value. And that's a huge value because you've seen that with lots of MGM, Ted Turner buying all the backlist of film. You've seen that many times.
Yeah,
if you looked at
equity,
you looked at equity, you look at what the backlist can create. So therefore, in the sense of when you look at it, you can repackage it, you can redesign it. We're repackaging something for China at the moment that was published 36 years ago.
Yeah.
So it never loses its ability to be able to generate more income without a huge investment. So in other words, if you have a list of product and you can repackage that product for a minimum cost, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And now with digital and now the new developments with digital and the new things, there's new opportunities.
Yeah, but you've never felt like cashing out and stepping back, but
if I feel, but I've got a lot of champagne, so I don't have to worry too much.
I guess the question, isn't it?
At the moment,
what do you
I'm
do
enjoying
with
what I'm
then?
doing.
Yeah,
right? I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I think sometimes you get a bit tired, and my husband's in his mid-80s now. You get a bit tired, but really, I think that what do you need? I don't sort of need I don't need some interviewer to go on and have famous houses of New Zealand or whatever it is with 3,000 bedrooms or something.
Yeah.
I'm not really, I've got a lovely apartment in New York. I've got an apartment in London. I've got lots of racehorses. I wish they'd win. But, what else do you need? You can only eat so much in a day anyway. And I work with wonderful friends around the world.
Sure. Just to finish up on a couple of the bigger questions, one of them is when you look back at, and you touched on it earlier, your background, not a lot of money, and very rural, humble beginnings. What do you think it is that makes the big difference in terms of success, in terms of why some people get stuck in a poverty trap and some people get out and escape? Is there something that you think is a sort of a defining characteristic?
I think resilience, people have tried to eliminate me. People have tried to lock me up almost. You just have to keep going. It's pretty hard. Sometimes you do. I think if you learn as a child that, basically you learn sort of solid values, and I think you have to learn values that, you don't go through life cheating people. You look at things that are responsible in the way you develop your property, the way I develop. Of course, one of the difficulties is that I suppose if I talked about a difficulty is that all of my staff have been with me so long. I mean, who's got an art director for 50 years? Somebody celebrated 50 years the other day. My secretary's 48 years. I mean, we're talking about people, my entire company, of all these people, of course. And, so maybe it'll have to be the Sunshine Retirement Village. Maybe I'll take Ryman on at their own job.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you've ever thought about politics, but one question I like to ask really is if we could make you Prime Minister for the day and give you a chance to change some policy, would there be a big policy or a big change you'd make to try and solve some of the social inequality problems that are out there? What would be the number one for you?
I tend to think of it looking at a practical way and take one example. We talk about children not going to school, which is tragic at the moment. And I worked a lot in Northland on some charity projects over the last 5 years. It's no use just sending a notice to people, I'm going to fine you if you don't bring your child to school. I would tend to really, really work with the iwi. And I think in this country we need to work together to solve the issue. We don't need to have, I'm going to do this and you're going to do that. Really at the end of the day, if we work together to solve the issue, I believe we could come up with a solution.
Yeah.
And a solution maybe is, and I've looked at this Northland project quite a lot, what brings the kids to school? Maybe we need a minibus to pick these kids up from school. But we do need wonderful Maori people to go to those families. If it's a Maori family or if it's a European family, we can work with Europeans to go to those and to find really what the issues are.
Yeah.
And really work with those children and really make sure those kids come to school. Once we get them to school, we're fine. We can do something with them. But it really distresses me to have children even at Otahu College, 15, 16-year-old boys who can't read. This is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. What are they going to do? What do you do with a 9-year-old ram raider or a 10-year-old child who ram raids? What do you do with that?
Yeah.
That is terrible. It's not just... It's a social issue as well that we have to look at, and we can't just leave it to everyone else. We've actually got to say, how's that? I know that I've tried to work in Rotorua with the Maori people. I know sometimes they say, this Pākehā Australian. Helen Clark used to say she's an Australian. We can put up with her. She brags too much. But you know what I'm saying? I work with Helen a lot. But, I think that we need to look at these solutions. And it's not easy, by the way. This is not easy. But you can't just make jargon. I hate jargon.
Yeah.
As I just need to say, it's like people contact me and say, we're doing a deep dive. And I think, I hope you're giving the snorkel gear. We tend to have all these jargon things. What actually do they mean? What does it mean? Really, how are you going to solve a particular problem? A lot of these problems are quite simple to solve. And they are, I suppose, complex from a family point of view. But we do need to look, I felt so sad yesterday. Last night I felt really sad. I brought this to the office today. Reading about how many families have to turn the electricity off and have no electricity. Yep. That was a really, really amazing article in the Herald. And I read it last night and I felt so sad. Here we are as a nation where we have to have children to go to a swimming complex so they can have a hot shower.
Yeah.
And some families are doing without power for like 3 weeks or something. That's just not good enough, is it, in a country like ours? That's not good enough.
No.
And that's not just a matter of money. That's a matter of looking at what the issues are and saying how we're going to solve it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, look, just finally, Wendy, I know we touched on it earlier, but what's on the immediate horizon for the publishing group?
Okay, well, we're working on, obviously, working on the famous, decodable readers, which we have decodable readers, which children can decode, and looking at the way how we teach and structured literacy, the way we teach in that way. And we've developed that with professors and other people around the world, and we've got the best structured literacy program. If people haven't bought it, they need to buy it now. Anyway, get into commercial, but The situation is it delivers an outcome. And also looking at, really, my dream will marry education and gaming together to create one of the great games for all children of the world who are struggling with reading. Can you imagine? Every 4- and 5-year-old and 6-year-old. And that'll probably be a wonderful footprint. Will I achieve it? I'm not sure. The third partner is out there. The third partner, some people are interested. But the big guys have said you'll never achieve it, Wendy, because nobody, that motivates me more than anything. No one has ever done this in the world before, so you won't do it, right? So actually that motivates me more when people say that. And also working with China as well, and some of the projects I'm working, I love the Chinese and the Asian market is fantastic.
Well, it sounds like there's no slowing down. Thank you very much for talking to us. Cheers, Wendy Pye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Money Talks. If you want to get in touch, drop me a line at liam.dan@nzme.co.nz. And you can read more from me at nzherald.co.nz. Thanks to my producer, Ethan Sills, and sound engineer, Leanne McDonald. Follow Money Talks on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes available every Thursday.